Greetings, everyone. I'm excited to welcome Andreas Brenner, co-founder and CEO at Jua, to the show. Andreas, welcome to the show today.
Hi, great to be here.
Great to have you here. So let's dive in. Tell us a little bit about your SaaS background.
Sure. So I was previously in an old industry, so I'm not going to talk too much about that. In SaaS, I started my first company called Avrios with two co-founders in 2015. We grew the company to about 10 million in ARR, and then we sold it to Battery Ventures at the end of last year. And then I am also founding investor in another company, which is just about at Series A level. The company is called CleanHub, has some sort of a subscription model. I'm also on the board of two other SaaS companies, all of them somewhere in the range of, let's say, 2 to 5 million ARR. And then at the same time, as you just said, I'm also co-founder and CEO of a pre-revenue SaaS company called Jua, where we do accurate weather forecasts. So we built the world's first end-to-end deep learning based weather forecasting model.
That's great. Everybody loves to talk about the weather. I'm located in Denver, Colorado right now, and we're supposed to get 9 inches of snow tonight. So we'll see. Who knows? It could be 2, it could be 14 inches, but you never know. So I love that. So yeah, tell us a little bit more about Jua, which is Jua. So tell us a little bit about what Jua does.
Sure. So for now, it's literally straightforward. We make weather forecasts significantly more accurate. Under the hood, we achieve that by using complementary data. So instead of using only the governmental, radar, airplane, satellite data that you would expect, we also throw IoT data into the mix. So we use data from smart homes, cars, and so on. So and then the other part is historically, weather forecasts have always been done with numerical weather models. So you could say people try to hard code the physics of the atmosphere. It's an oversimplification, but approximately that's what it is. We're taking a deep learning approach instead. So we're letting the machine learn the physics of the atmosphere, if you will. And to our knowledge, we're the first ones in the world who've done this outside of a research lab. So there's been research before, but nobody's really implemented this in a practically operational model. We're the first. For now, we provide this as an API, but also we're soon planning to release capabilities for customers to fine-tune the weather model for their specific purposes with their own custom data. And then the business model is a subscription one, so we sell that as a subscription model for now to get access to the API.
Okay, really interesting. I love it. Weather forecast and improving upon that process. So you say using government data sources, which a lot of folks use, but also IoT data, which is really interesting. And then we'll talk a little bit more about your company, but you said you recently founded, so we're just entering 2023 here. So did you found this in 2022?
That's right. Yes, we got together full time in April of last year to start working. In March of last year to start working on this company. We raised a little bit of money. We're now a team of 17 people, predominantly tech, because it's not so easy what we build in terms of technology, but it's a great.
And tell us your background. Do you have a technical background, or are you on the business side? What's your background?
So I'm interested in technology. I started making websites for other people when I was 12 years old, and that's kind of how I slipped into software and technology. I always preferred programming my calculator instead of listening to the German lesson in school or stuff like that. So it's always interested in the technical side, but I studied business. I'm the commercial guy. My co-founder is a machine learning engineer with a family business background in the weather space.
Okay, interesting. So founded the company in April 2022, team size of 17 right now, mostly on the engineering tech side. And then
Yes.
where are you located, or where's your company predominantly located then?
So I'm personally based out of Zurich in Switzerland. My co-founder is based in Berlin, Germany. And these are two of our hubs. And then the third We also have actually 5 or 6 people are in Cape Town in South Africa.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, common that people are in different locations. And okay, so founded 2022, and then you're in Zurich, co-founder Berlin, some folks in Cape Town, a team of 17. And so right now you are pre-revenue, but you're going to sell this on a subscription basis then? Will it be a pure, fixed rate subscription? Will there be any sort of usage component to the subscription?
So we are offering, in theory, there is a usage component. In practice, we're offering that as a fixed bundle. So in tiers, if you want volume tiers. So.
Okay, so subscription, but maybe some tiers as the usage increases, or some sort of indicator that they'll move up through the tiers based on the usage in the app or the API. Okay.
Yeah.
And you're really interesting. So with weather, so who are you going after as far as customers? Who's your ideal customer profile, or what type of customers would be interested in Jua?
The one thing that I quickly learned, as I was new to the weather industry, so I was a personal, I'm personally very involved with the topic. I'm a kite surfer and trail runner, and personally try and spend as much time outdoors as I possibly can. I had previously been working in renewable energy, so from the customer side, I had some good interest in the topic, but I was not familiar with the weather industry. And I think one thing that I learned is that, this is one of the top 10 keywords in the world on Google, I think. And then at the same time, it's much easier to find businesses that are not in some way affected by weather than it is to find businesses that are. And so you're rightfully asking the question, who's our ideal customer profile? And I think, building this business, one of the key things that matters is not so much identifying additional opportunity, but it's more about focus. I would lie if I were to say that we have 100% figured this out for the long term, but we're seeing a lot of inbound interest because of the specific features of our model. From anybody who's interested, particularly in accuracy and precipitation, that's also like physically one of the hardest nuts to crack. And it starts with simple, consumer weather apps, because as a consumer, when you look at the weather, what you really want to know mostly is, does it rain or not? Should I wear a jacket? Yes or no? Temperature, of course, matters, but that's just accurate enough. Precipitation is where we can still get a lot better. So consumer apps is one. And then on the more B2B side, we're seeing a lot of interest in the agriculture sector, where again, precipitation matters a lot. And the accuracy that our model can provide makes a meaningful difference for operational planning. And then the third key industry is renewable energies, and generally, more broadly, the energy sector, I would say.
Okay, interesting. So still figuring out your ICP, which makes sense, but consumer weather apps, which I used to use Dark Sky, which was bought by Apple and kind of consumed by the Apple app. I'm not sure if I like that integration yet, and then the B2B side, agriculture, which makes a ton of sense, and then renewable energy and broadly the energy sector. And for those other SaaS founders who are listening, who are in that same stage, develop a product, pre-revenue, how are you finding initial interest or finding these potential customers? Is it through your network? How are you generating initial interest in your application?
Yeah, so some of it is, of course, network, and then the other part is that we do some inbound marketing experiments. So we set up simple landing pages, and then we do some ads in different channels and see what comes in with very limited time and resources. As I said before, I have previously built a SaaS company, and what I found is that outbound email, or just in general outbound, is a great and efficient way to iterate your messages and get to product market fit fairly quickly. So this is also what we do here. And I think by now there is, at the time, it was still kind of a secret not a secret, but it wasn't as, known in the market in 2015. By now, I think everybody can manage to find a service that tells you at least the basics of how to do outbound, and you can take that and then iterate from there. So that's what we do, just outbound email, network, and a very, very little bit of marketing.
Inbound. So
Inbound
so
marketing.
so interest, so inbound marketing, a little bit of that, but outbound email. And I love that, iterating on your message till you find that product market fit or that message that resonates with your prospects. And so you recently raised a pre-seed round of, it looks like 2.5 million. And is that total capital raised to date that you can disclose at this point?
Yeah, so we raised actually significantly more money than that in the meantime, but that's not yet announced.
Okay. All right. Really interesting. I will look forward to that announcement. And so tell me, what, I usually ask you what triggers or milestones that led to this raise, but you're pre-revenue. So tell us about that process to go out and find investors. What helped in that process? Was it, because you previously founded a company? What helped you raise the 2.5 million with no revenue?
Sure. So yeah, I mean, having built a 10 million ARR business, certainly, I'm not one of the fund returners. I'm not one of the unicorn founders, but it does certainly help. But at the same time, my co-founder and I just literally published a kind of 5-phrase or so LinkedIn announcement, and then there just happened to be a lead investor with more than 20 years experience in our specific space, who just from those few sentences exactly understood what we do, and then kind of pitched back to us why they thought this was a great opportunity. So the track record helped me to build a little bit of competition around the term sheet that we got from this investor. But the term sheet was really, I think, a lucky coincidence that there was someone who loved the space, had a pre-existing thesis, and that person also happened to be connected to me on LinkedIn. Yeah, so big.
Yeah.
I wish I could claim we're just great, but I think it was a bit of a lucky punch or lucky coincidence.
Yeah. So maybe for the other founders listening, maybe not a repeatable motion to find an investor, but you're saying you just published a post on LinkedIn, right? What you're up to with this new endeavor, and so just randomly an investor with experience in the space saw this and said, "Yes, I'm interested," because they believe in that space.
That's right. Yes. So I guess what may be repeatable is building a bit of a LinkedIn network with investors and then keeping them engaged. This is actually something that I've learned from previous fundraisers, that I guess the common pattern that I see between this fundraise and the other is that something that my father always told me is, luck is when preparation meets opportunity. And I guess 10 years of, or close to 10 years of building network with VCs is the preparation, and then you get lucky. And maybe for the younger folks, that if there's any kind of younger founder listening, which I think is maybe the direction that we're taking this, I actually did that similarly when I started my first company. So at the university, I knew I was going to start a business eventually. So I started organizing, events for other founders, invited investors, and that way I built a network. And because of that, I already had a pre-existing network by the time that I started the first company, and that helped us raise less money, admittedly, as first-time founders, but at least we raised the money within 2 months or so that we needed to sustain ourselves for the first 18 months.
Yeah, and great advice. And that was my next question: tips and tricks, fundraising lessons. But it sounds like, of course, it comes back to the network again. Whether you're looking for a new job, new position, network is important, but also fundraising. You've built that network, you've maintained that network, and then your network through LinkedIn just happened to pay off in this case. And so that repeatable motion is work on that network and maintain that network.
Well, that's one thing. The other thing, particularly that I've seen, so I was in Europe and I asked myself at the time, and then I read a lot of content around, well, you don't want to screw up your cap table early, which I think a lot of European founders used to do at the time, maybe still do today. And so I asked myself, why is it that American investors are paying higher valuations? Is it just a market, or is it something else? So I flew to San Francisco, talked to people there, talked to Zurich, talked to people in Zurich, Berlin, and so on. And one thing I found is the typical founder I talked to in Switzerland spoke to maybe 10, 15 investors, and then ended up being sad if they got only one or a bad term sheet. And the average founder in the Valley was talking to 100 or more investors. Of course, in the Valley, that's a lot easier because the density of investors is much higher. It's changing slowly in Europe. But then I understood, it was quite clear to me that if I'm going to speak to 100 investors, and that's exactly the goal that I set for myself, and that's exactly what we did for each round. And I still use that as a metric today. And I learned, and yeah, so this quantity was one thing, because with experience, I guess you learn to recognize who is a good fit or not a bit earlier. Maybe nowadays I don't need to speak to 100 people for a round anymore, but still, even with having gone through, I guess, either gone through or advised on more than a dozen funding rounds, there are still factors that I cannot prospect from the internet, where a lot of people that I think should be interested drop off. So I still need to do a little bit of quantity to make sure that I end up with a good deal.
So it sounds like experience, of course, key in fundraising. And talking to another founder, he said, I think through his experience, he could tell within the first 5 minutes of talking to a potential investor whether there was going to be any fit with this investor. Do you kind of have built up that same experience and intuition when you talk to an investor? Can you tell within the first 5 minutes that they may or may not be a fit?
I would say I can tell typically you see within the first few minutes if they've already have a thesis on your space and actually like what you do, and they understand, they conceptually understand it. I think that much you can tell, but whether they're a fit or not, I don't think you can tell in 5 minutes, because there are lots of other considerations. Like, to me, the references, how have they behaved on announced and unannounced board positions that they held previously. So are they, are they generally interested in what we do? I think that you can typically tell in a very short amount of time. But from there to qualifying an investor properly is still a long way to go.
Okay, well, that makes a ton of sense. And that's really fair that maybe in that first 5 minutes, you can tell, do they actually understand your niche, which comes up a lot when I talk to SaaS founders. They may know technology, or they may know AI, they may know SaaS, but do they really know your niche, your space within that sector, which it sounds like you're talking to. So yeah, that's great advice, really fair. So really, appreciate the insight. So what's next for your company? What's coming up next that's exciting?
Wow, a lot of things. So there is on several levels. So on the one hand, we know today that our model has learned things about the physics of the atmosphere that are unknown to scientists now, or at least have never been modeled by scientists before. The model being a machine learning model, we now have to figure out what exactly those things are that we learned. So this is and how can we tell? Because if we give the model the same input data, then it gets better results as an output. And so that's very exciting on a scientific level. On the other side, we're in negotiation for the first kind of handful of commercial contracts. So that's a very exciting time. Who says they will open their wallet and who will actually do it? Who in this special time actually ends up working with us. So that's quite exciting. And then third, we're right now fairly well funded, but as a result of, once we're further ahead in the release of our product and on the commercial traction side, we're very likely going to raise again, although, we actually don't need that for some time. But I always think fundraisers are exciting, I guess, I'm now a lot less excited about the money. That's more just a necessity to get the job done. But it's always exciting because you do ask yourself the big questions, and you do get challenged left and right on all kind of little details, and it does make you, or it does make me at least, reflect a lot, and I like that. So those are some exciting things, and then, yeah, I think those are
Yeah.
the key ones.
Yeah, so I'm sure a lot coming up for the company. So exciting, early negotiation for your first commercial contracts, always exciting. And Andreas, really appreciate your time today, sharing your story and your background. If our listeners would like to learn more about you and your company, where should we send them online?
So first of all, of course, our very limited website, Jua.ai. But especially if you're a founder, you'll be smart enough to figure out my email address. So just email me, or connect. I am actually active on LinkedIn, so you can also find me on LinkedIn and connect me there. And as much time as I have available, I like to pay it forward. So if I can, help anyone, I will.
Yeah, well, appreciate that. So if you'd like to learn more about Jua, check out jua.ai, and you can probably figure out Andreas's email address there, and then look him up on LinkedIn. Pretty easy to find him on LinkedIn if you'd like to learn more about what he's up to. And Andreas, really appreciate your time today and sharing your story.
Thank you very much.